Welcome to the Life in Michigan podcast. Life in Michigan is more than an online magazine. We share the stories, experiences, and vibrant personalities that make the Great Lake State truly unique. In this podcast, we bring you inspiring, heartwarming, and sometimes unexpected conversations with people who call Michigan home. From the rugged beauty of the Upper Peninsula to the bustling creativity of Kalamazoo, we'll cover the stories and define what it means to live, work, and play in Michigan. Today on Life in Michigan, we are chatting with Paula Englin, Executive Director of the Michigan Cider Association, about the events, people, and apples driving Michigan's booming cider scene. From Cider Week GR to GLINTCAP, we dive into the can't miss festivals, cider tourism, and even how to become a certified Pommelier. Whether you are a longtime cider fan or just curious, we promise you'll enjoy this one. Hey, Paula, how are you doing?
Hi, Chuck. It's great to be with you guys today. I'm so excited to talk about apples and cider and all things Michigan.
Yeah, it's been a bit since we talked with you, and since the podcast is new, like we've talked with you and we've, grabbed a sentence here and there that we pulled out to put into an article, but we've kind of, like most people, haven't been privy to the conversations we've had. So this is our opportunity to kind of catch them up to speed. So we thought we would start off with like maybe you telling folks about like what you do with Michigan Cider and how you got involved with that.
Love to. Yeah, so the Michigan Cider Association has been around since 2014. And around that time in Michigan, there was starting to be more and more hard cider businesses. And cider has always been a little bit unique in our state in terms of some of the liquor laws and licensing. And so there was this sense in which, hey, we've got these growing, exciting businesses happening, but some of the laws just aren't really working for us, and elected officials maybe just don't really understand some of the nuance of hard cider businesses. And so a bunch of folks got together and formed what turned into the Michigan Cider Association. And so, yeah, we've been around just over 10 years now. Last December was our 10th anniversary. And I have the honor of being the first full-time staff member that the association has ever had. And that was made possible in part by some grant funding. We received a block grant because the MCA doesn't receive any tax dollars or anything like that. And so we have to do our own fundraising to create this really wonderful community that helps promote the vibrant cider businesses and apple farmers in our state. So I've been a cider enthusiast for a number of years. I would say I'm just generally a Michigan enthusiast.
Awesome.
And so I was visiting one of my favorite local cideries here in the west side of the state, Puck Ciders in Grand Rapids. And a friend of mine who was the tap room manager at the time told me that the Michigan Cider Association was in the process of trying to find an executive director. And I said, gosh, that sounds like kind of my dream job. Just like what an opportunity to tell the stories of these businesses and to learn more and all the things. And so to make a long story short, I have the pleasure of serving as the executive director for all these awesome businesses.
That's fantastic. Wow.
It does sound like a dream job.
Yeah.
It's
And
cool.
we love pucks because we made it out there. Was it last year? Day with Jay.
Maybe it was,
Yeah.
I think it was last year. It was
Yeah.
maybe in the spring. We have a friend that lives that way, and we've done it, what we call the Day with Jay.
Oh,
And
fun.
yeah, yeah. He calls himself a ninja brewer, the ninja brewer. And he works at Perrin.
Very
Not just,
cool.
yeah, very cool. And so like, you have like somebody that really knows beer, who's a brewer, craft a day for you. So, it's fun.
Yeah.
Um,
But he
yeah.
included some cider because he was like, you guys got to check out pucks. And so we were like, oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Good.
Yeah. And I
Well,
think the cheese lady was right next door, isn't it?
yes, they are next door. In fact, they just had an event a couple days ago. They collaborate several times throughout the year. And so she did a raclette, that really good melted
Yeah.
cheese, a pop-up inside Pucks, and it was packed. It was really awesome.
Awesome. That's
That does
fantastic.
sound awesome.
Mhm. It's
Wow.
fun too. I mean, you mentioned your friend that works at the brewery there. I'm seeing more and more in our state, businesses and craft beverage professionals that are venturing into different beverages than they originally started in. And often that means it's an and, not a instead of, which is kind of exciting because I think in this, post-COVID world, when people are having to make decisions about how often they go out and what they're spending their money on, it's really nice for families and groups of friends to be able to go to one spot and have all the variety of great things. So love to see
Yeah.
that.
Well, we're going to talk about collaborations because that's my new shtick is every time I get near anybody in the craft beverage industry, I'm like, so talk to me about collaborations. I'm working on an article or actually a series of articles for my brew trail that are focused on collaborations. And so, yeah, I'm busy talking to people about collaborations. I'm trying to what is going on with that because it just seems like they're everywhere and I love them. I love them.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Um, I think there's a piece of that is necessity, right?
Yeah.
We've got farmers that are having excess crops in some seasons and having rougher seasons other years. And so there's this sense in which sharing your knowledge, your resources, is so beneficial. And so I
Mhm.
love to see all the collaborations. And Michigan's really unique in terms of our terroir and the Great Lakes and some of the resources we have that other states aren't blessed with. And so that has allowed for, at least in the cider world, there's lots and lots of crossover with winemakers as well here in
Yeah.
Michigan. So
Yeah.
collaboration, sort of, like you said, name of the game.
Yeah, yeah. And it just gives me chills. Like the hair on my arm is standing up when we start talking about, because it's just, it's like helping each other. I love it. I love it. Before we get too deep into the nuts and bolts of our interview, because I've got a bunch of questions for you. I had to number them because I have so many. Um, could you give us just a brief history of cider and why Michigan is so unique? Like, what is it about the terroir that makes it so special? I mean, like I know because I've been talking to people like you and then in the brewing industry and in the hop industry. But could you tell us, you're the expert, right?
Well, I'm trying. I'm learning. I didn't grow up in a farming background, or I did dabble in doing some home cider production after I took a few classes just for fun. Um, but yeah, it's fascinating, really. So as you can imagine, when the U.S. was being settled and sort of around our early days as a new country, there was this cider was just such a part of that way of life and of that era, which was largely brought over from Europe. And so there were certainly apple varieties that came with folks as they were getting settled in here. And it's really interesting. I love, especially, we talk about Women's History Month. Back in those early kind of Revolutionary War era times, it was actually the wives and mothers that were making a lot of the hard cider. And it was beneficial because in some cases the cider was a safer beverage to drink because water was, sometimes a little risky. And so they would tend to make these lower alcohol ciders that were consumed by everyone in the community. And it also was a way to bring a little extra income to the family. So kind of this cool history we have in our country. We also saw during Prohibition, there were many cider-specific apple varieties. Those trees were torn out, which was a huge loss agriculturally, but thankfully they've been able to find straggler trees here and there. There's one variety in particular, Harrison, that was totally utilized during our country's founding, and then mostly eradicated during Prohibition era. But they did find a tree, I want to say around the 1970s, somewhere in there in New Jersey. And from that tree, they were able to bring back the Harrison apple, and it makes a fantastic cider. So I'm so grateful that happened. Here in Michigan, we certainly have some of the earlier hard cider businesses from the country. Uncle John's is one that comes to mind, kind of in the center of the state. And so that cidery really got some things started. They were able to get some grant funds from the federal government to buy some equipment, and they really led the way in terms of some of the other cider businesses getting started. One advantage Michigan has is, just as I've already kind of alluded to, we grow these fantastic apples. Especially in the past couple of years, we've had really stellar growing seasons. And so we've got kind of the traditional varieties that have been growing here for decades. We've got some, so culinary and dessert apples that can be utilized well in cider. But then also, MSU has done some great research to learn more about these old school cider specific varietals from France and England and other places as well. And so we're starting to see those varieties that you would never find at Meijer or Kroger or Whole Foods, things that even people that grow up in sort of apple growing areas may not be as familiar with, but they just make some really fabulous, interesting ciders.
Awesome. Yeah, we went to I think it's Alber. Is it Alber in
Auburn.
Alber?
Auburn.
Yeah,
It's
over
in
near
Manchester.
Manchester.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they had a bunch of those heirloom type of apples that I'd never heard of. And
Yeah.
for different uses, you could make them, just to, eat. And other ones where you would make a pie, but they make cider as well over there. And so I was like, oh, so I'm curious, like, what is it about certain apples that make them like better for cider than others? Is it just the sugar content of the apple? I'm assuming you couldn't get a bag of Fuji apples over at Meijer and make some good cider out of those, but maybe you could. I don't know.
Yeah. So I try to help people think of it in terms of wine, which I think is a little bit more broadly known, right? So, like some of the grapes that you would use, let's say a Chardonnay or Merlot, like you're not going to see those at Meyer either. And so it's similar things, right? Like what's the acid to sugar ratios, and what
Mhm.
about the tannins? Crab apples, which are kind of the bane of some homeowners' existence,
Yeah,
actually make fantastic hard cider.
really.
So you
Really?
really want that sort of like the sharpness and the sweetness, the contrast there can create a really beautiful, yeah, just an excellent cider. Whereas like some places are making Honeycrisp ciders because we grow so many in Michigan
Mhm.
and because it's very familiar for consumers. And they make a decent cider, but I would say it's a little bit less interesting. And so, but it does help when people are like, oh, I know that apple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, for sure. We have another Smackintosh is a cider made by Tandem up in the Leelanau Peninsula in Sutton's Bay there. And that is made primarily with Macintosh apples, as the name implies. And it's fantastic. And in fact, they won the best sweet cider at the Great Lakes International Cider and Perry competition last year. So
Wow.
always fun to see the Michigan apples represented and winning those awards.
That is cool. I'm going to ask you about events. I have a whole section about events, but before we get off, just the Michigan and why we're a great state for growing apples. I listened to another podcast doing my research to prep for this, and there was a conversation you had with that interviewer about the significance of the fruit ridge. Um,
Absolutely.
and why is it important to Michigan and for cider apples? Could you
Yeah.
share? Yeah.
Yeah. So for folks that are not so aware of that, the Fruit Ridge is an area a little bit north of Grand Rapids, so over on the west side of the state, and it produces many, many fantastic apple varieties that end up shipping all over the world. So we have some of those that are grown and processed there. You will find at your grocery store in the bags of apples that say Michigan apples, which plug for that. It's really, really easy to see Washington apples and a couple of the like hot varieties from New York at our grocery stores. I would encourage all the Michiganders to look a little bit more diligently and buy Michigan apples because they're grown so locally and they're
Yeah.
fantastic. They're going to be more crispy and delicious, and it's a great way to support our economy as well. So I'll get off my soapbox for that.
You can stay
But
up there. That's fine. I like listening.
yeah. But yeah, so Fruit Ridge, it's just this awesome environment that's again collaboration between growers and processors, um, making apple juice, making juice that's used for hard cider, making juice that's used for sweet cider. I believe they make some of the apple snack bags that are put in some of the healthier choice fast food meals for kids. I mean, it's really this fantastic area that is so important to our state, but also to globally as well.
Fantastic.
It's also I'm recalling that conversation with Rhea Wincolor on the Cider Chat podcast, and she asked me about, what's it like during bloom there,
Yeah,
and
she
Oh,
just
did.
yeah.
yeah, and so if you've ever been around blossoming fruit trees, it's quite a special thing. But when you go to an area that has acre after acre after acre of fruit trees, particularly apple blossoms, it is one of the most remarkable sensory experiences of your life. So I would encourage everyone. Fall is always a great time to go harvest apples, but the spring, when the bloom is happening, is just gorgeous, and you deserve the experience of seeing that at least once in your life.
Yeah.
So when about if we were going to put this on our calendar, like when should we prep for that? Like
I think it's coming up.
April, end of
Yeah,
April?
it always varies, just like all farming seasons do. So last year everything was about 2 weeks early last year. And so typically we try and have that event I mentioned, GLINTCAP, uh, tends to overlap with when bloom is happening here in West Michigan. But again, last year it was more like the beginning of May. And so this year it's sounding like things are moving a little bit more slowly. And so I think we'll probably have bloom, depending on where you are in the state. Certainly that makes a difference, but around the middle to later parts of May this year. But
Okay.
it's a great question to ask your local orchardist. Um, for farmers of all crops, not just apples, the weather is really pretty critical to their livelihood and to the way that they work. And so when we have those like super, super hot days in like February or early March, it can be a little bit scary. We're like, yes,
Yeah.
spring's on the way, spring's
Yeah.
on the
Get the
way.
shorts out again.
But for our growers, that can sometimes cause alarm. So it's fascinating to have those conversations with them, and you're going to learn something about their process, and then also just gives you fresh perspective on the crazy Michigan weather we tend to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we interviewed Evan Westervelt. Is that how you say his name, Chuck?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
from
Westervelt.
yeah, from Midland Brewing Company. It was a couple weeks ago. We actually ran into him at the Winter Beer Festival over in Grand Rapids, and we ran into him, and I don't know, we started talking, and I'm like, I got to get you on the podcast. So we made a date for the podcast, and he was literally sitting in his car for the interview for our podcast, and he had just left the Michigan Craft Beverage Summit. And
Yeah.
he had sat next to you, and he was really like, he was jazzed. He was like super excited. He's like, I'm excited. There's a lot of really positive stuff going on. And and like, I felt good. I'm like, after I got done talking to Evan, I'm like, yes, life is good. Um, so I have to admit, I don't know much about the summit, and I'm guessing many of our listeners don't know much about the Michigan Craft Beverage Summit. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what it is and why
Yeah.
it exists? And yeah.
For sure. So the Craft Beverage Summit, this was just the second year that it's existed. And it's an event that's put on by the Michigan Craft Beverage Council, which is made up of members that represent sort of just exactly what it sounds like, all of the craft beverage companies and sort of avenues. So we've got the distillers, winemakers, cideries, and brewers all coming together on that council. And so the bulk of the work that they do is funding research to support craft beverages in Michigan. But they also put together this summit the past 2 years. Now, the 2 years looked quite different from each other. I think in 2024, they had a good partnership with the MEDC, and that sort of got reprioritized this year. But
What's the Emmy? What is that?
Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Okay.
Yeah, and so one piece that I know my cidery owners really enjoyed from 2024 was there was like buyer speed dating set up. So the owner and cider makers could come in and schedule appointments with folks from Meyer and some of the fine dining places across the state, et cetera. And that was very beneficial. Again, like always trying to find new partnerships and meaningful networking so that we can support each other's businesses, of course. But this year, yeah, we spent a day together. The evening before, there was kind of a mixer bottle share for all the beverage makers, which was it's fun to try each other's products and celebrate all the good work that's being done. And actually that event, because it is a little bit more social in nature, I've seen some really cool collaborations come from that. Just having the chance to like no real agenda, just talk together and swap ideas and sometimes commiserate too. This year's been tough for small businesses.
Yeah.
And so being able to say, hey, we're seeing this work really well, but also February was really slow and it's hard. And so there's real beauty and sort of energizing from those conversations. But the summit itself focused on trying to find information that would be helpful across all those beverage categories. So sort of an economic outlook from a gentleman that's on the council that works at Meyer was really interesting and helpful. We had producers talk about, again, some of like their branding strategies and things they're learning around innovation and trying to capture new customers. We also had a session with the Michigan Liquor Commission to share some of the things that they're learning as they do their MLCC on the road and meet with different producers across the state. And then finally, there was a panel discussion at the end to try and equip the business owners there to do a lobbying event to engage with their elected officials. So great day, very full day, and really awesome. Yeah, to meet folks that, you know, you've maybe seen their product at a Brewers Guild event or read about them online, but then to be all in the room together was really nice.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I was curious, you know, I know that we're not actually producing anything as far as, you know, other than writing and photographs, but we've kind of ensconced ourselves as enthusiasts with, you know, craft beverage and craft cider. So would the summit at all apply to somebody that has just a huge interest in those beverages, but isn't really actually producing them?
I would say for folks like yourselves that are doing some media work with craft beverage producers, there would definitely be value. For people that just generally love Michigan wine, beer, cider, and spirits, less so. If you're kind of industry adjacent, absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
So did you see any cider focused partnerships forming out of the summit this year between like makers, growers, spirits, beer, anything that you thought was like, oh, that's interesting?
Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head other than just folks trying to pair up and say, oh, I have this this item in my production facility that I no longer need. And then yeah, I was telling folks, hey, we've had these booming apple crops the past couple of years. And so if you're wanting to make cider, if you're wanting to distill things, I mean, as I mentioned, Uncle John's earlier, they make vodka out of Michigan apples. And so we're seeing more of our cideries and more distilleries that are realizing, hey, I don't have to buy grain, or I can
Oh,
at least
really?
supplement some of my distillate with Michigan apples.
Really? I
Yes.
didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
super interesting.
And they're great. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
That
Mhm.
is good.
For
That
some,
is super exciting.
yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. I didn't know that. Um, so there's a number of Michigan cider events coming up that everybody should add to their calendar, and we'll make sure and put a list in our show notes. But do you want to just kind of like run us through them? I mean, I have on my list, we have the Michigan Apple Festival. We have Cider Week in Grand Rapids. There's the GLINTCAP, there's the Grand Rapids Wine, Beer, and Food Festival. Like, talk about them a little bit if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. So, basically, what I've learned in my time in this role, which is what the cider business owners have known for a long time, is that cider is still a little bit misunderstood or dismissed. And so that's not true across all generational demographics. But I would say probably millennials and up have an impression of cider. And this was actually something that came up with the folks in the wine industry at the Craft Beverage Summit as well, which is that when the Michigan wine scene and even the Michigan cider scene first started out, it's not that old of an industry. And
Yeah.
so we were learning as we went along. And so, if the cider or wine that you tried from Michigan 20 years ago is way different from what's being produced now. And for cider too, a lot of folks, I mean, myself included, tried some macro brand ciders or things that were like described as a cider that actually have very, very little apple in it during the college years or just out of college years. And many of those beverages are like pretty sickly sweet. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I don't like cider. Like I had it, been there, had that. It's not for me. And so what I always say is like, hey, have you had a bad cheeseburger? And everyone's like, oh yeah. I'm like, but you still eat cheeseburgers, right? They're like, yeah, I love cheeseburgers. It's like my favorite. I'm like, exactly. Like you can have had a bad beverage, a bad cider at some point in your life, but don't write it off across the board. And it's really interesting because there's so much diversity in terms of what is being produced here in Michigan around really that full spectrum of dry to sweet, hopped ciders, barrel-aged ciders, ciders where they're adding fruit and botanicals. And so I really try to encourage people. So to take a step back, why I bring that up is because the more exposure we have with guests, with people that are future cider drinkers, as I like to say, that is really meaningful to the work that we're trying to do to spread cider love in the Great Cider State. And
I love
so
that.
those events that you mentioned, yep, coming up first here we have Cider Week Grand Rapids, which is May the 9th through 17th. And basically, that's a way to equip our business owners here in Grand Rapids to do a little bit more fun and creativity around cider. And so we will have Michigan ciders featured at several of those venues, but it'll be other cideries as well. And so that's looked like House Rules is a fun board game bar in town. They do a Northern Michigan hard cider event that's with board games during Cider Week. Aperitivo down at the downtown market has done a cheese and cider pairing before. That's very exciting. Last year, Little Bird, which has just won Best Restaurant and Best Chef in Grand Rapids, they
Wow.
did a cider, a high-end paired cider dinner that was really excellent. Seven Monks does a great tap takeover for us and did a really fun food pairing as well. And that's just a sampling. There's several businesses that jump in, as well as the cideries that are around Grand Rapids and Greater West Michigan. So if you're a cider drinker or if your friend is or your spouse is, it is not to be missed. It's 9 days. It starts over Mother's Day weekend and then sort of culminates with the Michigan Cider Festival, which is on May the 17th, a Saturday. And that is a cider specific festival where people can taste I think last year we had over 40 or 50 Michigan hard ciders.
Awesome.
And it's downtown, live music, food trucks. It's a great time.
I think we
So
were at that last year.
yes, I thought so.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
I
we were at
remembered.
that last year. We had a great interview with a gentleman who had just been at GLINTCAP, and he had
Jerry,
gone,
yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just met with Jerry at People's Cider yesterday. He's going to be helping with GlintCap again and some behind the scenes important work. And so it's always fun to meet up with him and talk strategy for that event.
That's
So
cool.
also during Cider Week is GlintCap, which is again the Great Lakes International Cider and Perry Competition. It's this really unique thing. It ends up being the world's largest cider competition, and
Wow.
and
Crazy.
it's hosted in Grand Rapids every May. And so it's such an honor for the Michigan Cider Association and for Michigan in general that we get to host that. And that's a closed event that is very focused on recruiting sort of cider experts from around the world. We have a gentleman from England and Spaniard, Austrian coming in this year. We're having some conversations with a gal from Australia. Last year we had folks from Chile as well. So it is very international and we get entries. I've got some from Russia coming in and Japan, plenty from Canada, and certainly, of course, the US. And it just provides this sort of unparalleled educational opportunity for folks that make cider. And in fact, it's open to home cider makers. So we typically have around 300 ciders that are coming in from folks that just do this for fun.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's a wonderful event. Provides each cider receives feedback from three sort of highly vetted judges. And then they can earn some medals as well. And it's a great time of community too for those that come in. What is open to the public is we accept people who want to apply to be stewards. And those are the folks that bring out the flights of cider to the judges. It's a blind judging. And so if you've ever wanted to see the inner workings of the world's largest cider competition, there's certainly a few volunteer opportunities for folks.
Holy cow. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be pretty cool. And
Yeah,
so
it would be.
you mentioned Perry, and what for folks that don't know, what is Perry?
Absolutely. So Perry is one of the other palm fruits. And Perry is essentially like a hard cider that's made from pears. There's,
Oh,
there's
okay.
several that are made throughout the state here in Michigan. It's also very popular in the United Kingdom. And then another palm fruit is quince. And we learned last year with our judge from Chile that that is widely utilized in the Chilean cider culture. And so that's fun to sort of broaden the horizons that way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Awesome.
So then there's the Michigan Apple Festival. That is
Yeah.
the fall, right?
It is, yeah, in September. And so that's an event that takes place in Sparta. And I think it's been happening for a couple of decades at least. I don't know exactly how long. But that's right up there in that Fruit Ridge area that we were talking about. And they just have all sorts of really fun, family-friendly activities throughout that weekend. Including, I actually had a friend that was helping with our cider area that day. One of the competitions they offer is an apple peeling competition. And so it's to see who can make the single longest strand of apple peel. And he was raised in northern Michigan up in the UP and had to help his mom make pies quite a bit. And so he was successful, I think, to the chagrin of some of the other moms that were participating.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, so that's a fantastic event. This past year, 2024 was our first year that we had the honor to participate in that. And so we received a special liquor license from the state to set up kind of a big cider tent area. And we're sort of the official drink of the Michigan Apple Festival, which
That's
feels
cool.
very right to me. And
Yeah.
so it was fun. We have a draft trailer that's owned by Vandermill Cidery here in Grand Rapids that they so kindly let us use. And it holds 11 different kegs. And so we brought 11 different Michigan hard ciders. and all of which the apples were grown within an hour of where we were standing there in Sparta.
Oh,
And so
awesome.
that's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah.
That was a fun opportunity again to take folks that sort of had like I only drink beer. Like what Budweiser do you have? And I don't know.
Yeah,
This is
cider.
all Michigan cider. And so just to really kind of tease them a little bit and say, hey, I bet you we can find a cider that you're gonna like. And yeah, the vast majority were sort of converted that day, which is just really fun and exciting.
Yeah, because that, I mean, if you think about it, so they, in the craft beer world, well, I think it's a big deal when somebody says that my beer is all Michigan ingredients. But with cider, that's even easier to do because, I mean, you basically just need the apples, in that area. Boom, you've got Michigan made, pure Michigan.
Yeah, so we've done some surveys with Michigan cideries the past couple of years. And yeah, both years it was like over 80% of all of the ingredients for all of their ciders were grown in Michigan.
That's
Um,
awesome.
Wow.
yeah, so that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah. So the Michigan apple, so kind of getting back to that area where enthusiasts can be involved. So Michigan Apple Fest for sure is one of those areas. And then I also think probably the Grand Rapids Wine, Beer, and Food Fest because we went to that one year and that was awesome.
Yeah,
But
it's
there's
a
plenty.
great event.
Yeah.
I mean, that
It's
is sort of like option overload for anybody that likes to drink at all. And in fact, this year they really even added, or excuse me, last fall, I should say, it's held in November. They added quite a bit of options for low and no alcohol folks. So I love to see that when it's truly an event that like anyone can find something they'll like at. But yeah, so we had the opportunity again to bring that draft trailer with us and have a bunch of different types of ciders for people to try out. Again, all from Michigan, of course. And there's some really fun ones, like we have one MCA member, Odd Brothers. They're out of Homer, Michigan, and they make a cider that's bright green. And I think it's
I've
called
had it.
Cooler. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
delicious. They call it like mimosa style. And it's meant to be kind of this fun throwback to like the 1980s and Ghostbusters and all that. So it's fantastic. We had another one that has been really popular from Painted Turtle over in Lowell. They make one, I think it's called Cranberry Craze. And it's this really beautiful sort of cranberry color and really kind of strikes that sweet tart balance really nicely. So, yeah, it's fun to
Awesome.
share all those things.
Awesome.
So, I want to ask because like I don't know the answer to this question, and you might just say, I don't know, Brenda. But I've been thinking about the Upper Peninsula and cider and the ability to grow fruit trees up in the UP. I mean, what's going on up there? Is there anything happening in the UP in terms of growing cider or the cider industry or growing apples? And is it just like the wrong climate? Like it's just not a good space.
My limited understanding is that it's a little too cold up there. However, there is Barrel and Beam up in the UP, and they make some great ciders. And it, I guess I don't know super specifically. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some orchards, but certainly not the amount that we see in the Traverse City area, here, Fruit Ridge, and Southwest Michigan. Those are kind of the primary, and Metro Detroit too, actually, a little bit north of Detroit, has quite a few orchards as well. But to my knowledge, they don't do super well up in the UP.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Just it's kind of like hops, right? Like it's just too far up, so they don't like the growing season is off, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not that you couldn't have an apple tree, but it's not going to be a great producer that you're going to support the apple
Yeah,
industry.
and just like other fruit, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of apple varieties. And so it may be that there are certain varietals that would grow just fine in that type of a climate. I couldn't tell you those off the top of my head, but yeah.
I was just curious I'm like, I bet Paula would know. I'm gonna ask her.
But barrel and beam cider is really good. So,
It
and they're
is.
up
Yeah.
They're
there.
one of our
So
favorites. They're
Yep.
one of our favorites. But they, they do great cider, but they're actually like their beer is like the thing, right? At Barrel
for
and Beam.
sure. I first learned about them. Some friends and I started a sour beer festival that we just run out of my house. And that's when I first had exposure to Barrel and Beam. They make some really fantastic sour beers, but
They
they
do.
it seems like they're doing everything well.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. They
They
do.
do.
They do. So can you tell us about certified, and I'm not sure if I can say the name correctly. Is it Palmiers? Like
Pommelier. Yes.
Pommelier. All
Kind
right.
of like sommelier, Pommelier. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Pommelier.
So as we were talking about just a moment ago, Pom again is sort of that umbrella category for apples and pears and quince, and there might be one or two others, but apples and pears being the most utilized. And so this is an educational track and certification that the American Cider Association created several years ago now, just to kind of provide a framework for cider excellence for people that both know the theory and then are trained to do sensory analysis. So yeah, it would sort of mirror like a sommelier or a cicerone track, cicerone being for beer. And so there's a first level where we sort of have the MCA board has this unofficial goal of having the most certified cider guides, which is that level one in Michigan over
Wow.
any other state. So we have some work to do there, but that's something we're excited about. So that's kind of the first level, and that's a really good tool for anybody that's working in a tasting room or a tap room where a lot of guests might be ordering cider. It just kind of provides a nice foundation to help people understand how cider is made and give them a little bit of the language for cider suggested food pairings. Um, Super easy. They provide some great study resources. Highly recommend it. And then for folks that are really wanting to do kind of a very intense, more comprehensive program and certification, that's the Certified Pommelier. And so we just confirmed yesterday, I'm very excited. We're going to be having an in-person Certified Pommelier exam the first day of GLINTCAP this year. So that'll be Wednesday, May 14th. And folks, we have a nice little study group of Michiganders from all over the state that are working to study together. And that just sort of came together. So
That's
it's
cool.
very fun and exciting to see because currently Michigan just has 2 certified pommeliers. And so we'd love to see that number grow.
Wow.
Wow.
How
Wow.
how does somebody get into that if they wanted to start doing that?
Yeah, so the American Cider Association website has lots of good resources. You can find the study guide actually on Amazon as well. And then I'd certainly be able to help as well. They can email me. One of the 2 pommeliers we have in Michigan is on the Michigan Cider Association board, and he loves to help people that are starting out in that journey and encourage them. So happy to help that way.
Excellent.
All right. So actually, like when we talked last, you were talking about this study group, and I actually interviewed Danielle from Tandem Ciders about the cider group and its study group, and I was kind of jealous. I wanted to be able to go to this group because she was talking about like you would meet and you would bring in cider from like England, like France or wherever, and like I was like, well, I want to try that, right? Like it sounds very interesting. So are you part of that study group?
So I try to go whenever I can. They're actually meeting tonight, and sadly, I'm not able to attend. But so they meet monthly up at the MSU Research Station in Leelanau Peninsula. And yeah, they are often working with a company out of Washington State called Press Then Press. And that company carries ciders from all over the world. many from the Pacific Northwest, as you might imagine, but really from all over the world. And so you are able to curate a box and then they'll ship them to you. And so oftentimes the tasting group up in Traverse City will focus on a particular region. So I think they've done Spanish ciders and French and English, different parts of North America as well. And basically it's very fun and enjoyable, but it's very much educationally focused. The group is trying to work on their sensory analysis, much like when you would see somebody, you might deem them as snobby or whatever when you're wine tasting, but you see someone sort of looking at what's in the glass, giving it a couple of, sniffs and swirling it around. That's essentially what this group is doing. And again, part of that Pommelier exam is really being able to evaluate what are the scents that are coming out, what's the aroma, what is the mouth feel, what is the bouquet, and I wonder what apples maybe were used in this, and how much fermentation occurred, how sweet is it, what's the acid, all of those pieces that you would think of when you're evaluating a beverage. That's what they're working on together. So it's very fun. Like I said, I try to go up there as much as I can. And so there's a few folks that are monthly regulars that are going to be taking that exam, as well as some folks from downstate that are going to meet up and work on it together.
Awesome.
That is awesome. It sort of reminds me of, so like we've done the sensory testing or guided sensory testing, like I don't know if it's just like a seminar at the Michigan Brewers, it's the Great Lakes Beer Conference. And
Okay.
it's not, they'll take you through like and it's somebody that's running, like I think typically Bell's, or is it Founders? Bell's runs the sensory workshop at during that conference. And it's more like just training your senses. Like when you smell this, it's grapefruit, right? Or it's this taste, or what, and being able to describe it and being able to do it reliably. And so it sort of reminds me of like like if you're in the beer world, of having a being able to be able to say, oh, this grain or this hops smells like this, right? A little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So different apple varietals, of course, have different qualities. And then depending on how the fermentation process went and the style of cider that they're trying to make. So this is exactly, it kind of relates to what we're doing at GLINTCAP. We're having these judges. Each cider that's entered will have 3 judges that are doing that evaluation to say, okay, you submitted it as, an heirloom cider that's dry. So is what's in the glass in front of me represented to that style? Is it true to that style? And then that's the feedback that the cider makers get, whether they're home cider makers or Blake's.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. That helps because like I still want to be part of the group, but it's not probably a good group for me.
Well,
Well, I mean, I'm still a relative beginner in doing sensory analysis and learning all of these fun nuances of the ciders, and they're very warm and welcoming. So if you said you wanted to go, um, it is people take it seriously and they're trying to learn and have conversation about, well, I got this. Did you get that? But they're also very welcoming and everyone's invited to go learn and have some fun and try some great ciders.
that's
All right,
awesome.
bro.
Do you ever does that ever occur like during any of the either the cider festival or at the Michigan Apple Festival? Do you ever do anything like that with just everybody to kind of get an experience for what the different tastes should be? Sort of that sensory experience for folks?
We haven't tried that yet, and I think that's typically because so many of the guests at those events are brand new to cider.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a little bit of opportunity. If people stick around at our booth or in our tent area, I do try to ask them, what is it, what does it remind you of, or what does it taste like to you? And I think to me, one of the ultimate compliments for our industry is when somebody has this memory triggered of going to an apple orchard or going to a cider mill, I think that's a really beautiful thing that that sip can point them to that past memory.
Yeah, I know that when we went to Ore Creek over in Pinckney,
Oh
they
yeah.
did a great job of like asking you, if you, whether whatever you know about cider, trying to pair those up and give you the different, like basically help you learn about those different flavors and different tastes and the dry versus semi, the sweets. And it was really cool, really good experience. And I was just curious if that happened at other places, which I'm gonna guess it does at other
Yeah,
cideries, but
absolutely. I will say, I think retailers that are usually the smaller mom and pop stores um, have a really great ability to do that with their customers. So I met somebody that was actually at the Craft Beverage Summit, and he was sharing that his approach to engaging customers, whether they're, regardless of what type of Michigan craft beverage they're wanting to buy, or really beverage, is to say, who's going to be around the table? Like, who are you celebrating with? Is this your mom? Is it your college friends? Your daughter just turned 21, whatever. And so who's around the table? And then what are you putting on the table? Are you doing a pot roast? Are you doing like a
Sushi.
cute brunch, sushi,
yeah.
whatever? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I thought that was such a great way to provide extra options for customers, because I think so often we can sort of walk into a store and be like, oh, I think I just need like champagne because I need sparkling wine. And it's like, well, or like, I just need, it's summer, so I'm gonna buy some lager beer because
Yeah.
that's like, a crispy thing. And it's like, sure, those aren't bad choices, of course, but you're kind of limited in your mindset because you're just trying to cross it off your list. And these folks are really able to provide some more interesting recommendations that people tend to get excited about once they've tried them.
Awesome.
hmm
That's cool.
I would agree. You know who does that really well is Jay Friendly over at Withington's in Chelsea. And if you walk in, he asks those kinds of questions like, who's at your table? What are you serving? Are you having, is it a turkey dinner? Are you having a ham? So yeah, and he's a mom and pop store for sure. And he's got everything in there. If you've not checked that store out, you really like, I'm putting a plug out there for Jay and his
Nice.
store in
Yeah, it's a
Withington.
great,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
a
great store.
very lovely store. So I'm looking at the clock, and we'd like to try to keep our interviews to about an hour. And I have a few more questions. And so one of them has to do with collaborations in tourism. Is there anything exciting you want to share that that's going on in the communities out there, in the cider communities is it about agro-tourism? Are they building cider trails like they have beer trails? Are there any collaborations going on that would be fun to talk about at this point?
Yeah, so one of the things that we learned at the Craft Beverage Summit a couple of weeks ago here was that Michigan tourism saw um, over 10% growth from 2023 to 2024. And
Oh, wow.
that's huge for these businesses. A lot of the time, people are coming in to sort of experience, sure, the Great Lakes and golfing and the beaches and all the things, but also folks are coming for craft beverage experiences, absolutely. And so for cideries in particular, we're seeing more and more of the Michigan apple growers, hard cider producers also add in elements that are more like you picks opportunities, corn mazes, delicious donuts made fresh, sort of that sort of farm experience, which is really fun and family friendly. And it's awesome to see more businesses growing that way. We've also seen a lot of growth from our small cideries going to farmers markets and providing samples for folks. That's a huge win for those businesses, and it makes the farmers market quite a bit more fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, and just really We're learning that the next generation, Gen Z, is really focused on experiences, and they're focused on they are one of the most smart generations and have the most access to information. I mean, you see those young people on their phones a lot, and that might frustrate you. But what that means is they are more informed and more conscientious about what they're consuming than any other generation ever has been. And so for these businesses, it's going to continue to be really important to tell the story. Many of the hard cider businesses are family owned, husbands and wives, brothers, multi-generation. And so that in and of itself, I mean, have you ever considered what it'd be like to run a business with your sibling?
Yeah.
No.
That's a special kind of
Right.
crazy slash love. And there's a bunch that are doing that, and just it's awesome to see. I've gotten to know, certainly we have several sets of brothers running businesses in the Michigan cidery. So Pucks is one, 2K up in northern Michigan, Odd Brothers, Robinettes. And just the way that each sibling's kind of skill sets and passions helps drive the business forward is really cool to see. Um, yeah, and so lots of different things are happening. I would say a great resource, I'm going to plug our own website, michiganciders.com. We have a cider map on there that shows businesses that make and sell their own hard cider throughout the state. And Michigan actually has the most certified hard cider businesses of any other state, which is why
Wow.
I call it the Great Cider State.
Yeah.
And so certainly it's very easy if you're heading to some of these areas during some of the more tourist-driven months, probably between May and October. It's very easy to piece together kind of a little cider trail and really support these awesome businesses and find the diversity of the different ciders available.
Wow.
Fantastic. I can't wait to get out there and go get on those trails because I'm sure there's ways to do that where you're getting into the trail systems along especially on the West Coast, there's a lot of great trail systems that would be convenient to hit some cideries as you're biking along or
Absolutely. Yeah.
walking.
Well, that's fun. I mean, we talk about collaboration, but as I sort of alluded to, in Michigan, I would say, I think mostly over the past 10 to 12 years, we've seen wine producers that basically, I think that as tourism has grown in some of those areas, they haven't been able to keep up with the demand of their wines. So towards July, August, they were selling out of some of the wines. And so I think adding cider was a strategy to say, oh, well, we can have some other beverage options available, and this might help us stretch our wine production a little bit. And for some of these businesses, their cider does better and, in my opinion, tastes better than some of the wines that they were selling out of. And so it's really cool to see how there's this good community that is willing to share information and support each other. And yeah, certainly we're all making lots of good things and getting to enjoy lots of good things.
Yeah, yeah, and there definitely is that collaboration, like I guess it's not technically a collaboration, but an expansion of beverage options. So like Batch in Detroit has distilled ciders and they have beer, right? There's
Yep.
lots of that happening, which I think is
Yeah,
great because it gives you
Thornapple
more.
Brewing Company and Grand
Yep.
Rapids here does everything as well and quite well. It's impressive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's gluten free.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
So if you
So
got a
like,
problem with beer, there you go.
yeah, it's always a good option. Um, so we're gonna wrap up here. I had a couple more questions, but I'm just gonna all right, I guess I'm gonna have to skip them because don't want to go on too long. But you mentioned the website. Any final thoughts on what's next for Michigan Cider that you haven't like touched on?
Yeah. So I think it's a really exciting time for Michigan cider. Something that we're seeing again, I touched on sort of the up and coming generation. Another thing that is fascinating to me is the rise of Ozempic and some of these other weight loss drugs. And we learned that within the next 5 years, it's expected that 15% of the US adult population will be using these types of drugs.
Wow.
And when you're on weight loss drugs of that nature, you really are trying to do lower calorie, lower carb, lower alcohol inputs, essentially. And so cider is in a really great position for both folks that are trying to be healthy. There are ever increasing opportunities for NA and low alcohol ciders. But it's also, as you mentioned, it's gluten free. You can ferment cider fully dry and it tastes fantastic. And so lots of opportunity there for health conscious drinkers. And yeah, again, for Gen Z folks who are interested in like, what are you doing to invest in the community? What are you doing to help protect the planet? Cider is well positioned because there's a lot of community advocacy work that our cider makers and their businesses are supporting. And again, when you're using products to make your end beverage that are grown within an hour of your business, it really is wonderful and meaningful for energy consumption and saving the planet and all those good things. So yeah, I think cider has a very strong future in Michigan. There's several cideries in planning that will be opening in the next few years, which is exciting. And we have the natural resources and the human talent to continue growing in a really beautiful way.
Awesome. That sounds great.
So you want to ask the last question, John?
Sure. So Paula, we've been asking the kind of our trademark last question, and that is, what's your perfect day in Michigan? So like, where would you go? What would you do? And what beverage would you finish it off with?
Ooh, that's hard. Only because there's so many options, I would
I
say.
know.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm just gonna go with what came to mind first. So I'm gonna say that I would go to Nordhaus Dunes Recreation Area. I would backpack in
All
and
right.
probably bring a couple of ciders that I had stuck in the freezer for a little bit. It turns out most ciders will do okay. You can stick them in there for a little bit to chill them way down and then hike out with them onto the dunes. Yeah, and so I think I would, after a very sweaty hike in, hopefully just before sunset, sit on one of the sand dunes, look at the lake, and drink a Michigan Wine Company. Probably their Perry, I think I would go for. Either their Perry or their hop cider sounds like it'd be perfect for just after a sweaty hike on the sand dunes.
Awesome. Fantastic. That sounds good. I'm gonna have to go. I want to get out there now.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
me
too.
too.
Even though it's cold and a little blustery, but it's
Yeah.
still awesome. Yeah. Well, Paula, thank you so much for being on Life in Michigan.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having me. It was so fun to catch up and talk about the good things happening in our state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Sounds great.
So, Chuck, what is your favorite Michigan cider?
Oh, let's be honest. I am a beer guy, but a few stand out for me, and that would be anything from Pugs, anything from Ore Creek, anything from Batch, or Barrel and Breen. All of them make fantastic ciders, which I love. And you know what else I loved? I loved talking to Paula. She has so much passion for Michigan cider.
I know. I learned so much from her in that brief 45 minutes we were on the podcast. There's GLINTCAP and the Pommelier exam. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then there's the cider and cheese pairing she mentioned.
Yeah, all that sounds awesome. And I wish we could get over to Grand Rapids for this year's Cider Festival. Last year was so much fun. But at least we have the Michigan Apple Festival on our calendar.
Where is that Michigan Apple Festival?
It is in Sparta, in the heart of the Fruit Ridge, every September. Check out the show notes for links to all the events Paula mentioned, info on how you can become a Pommelier, and our article, Pressed to Impress, for more cider goodness. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast service to catch every episode of Life in Michigan. Help us spread the word by rating the show, sharing it with your friends, your neighbors, your family, your mail carrier. Share it with everybody, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay connected by following us on our website and social media. This is a Life in Michigan production. Until next time, take care and have a fantabulous day in Michigan.